You are not who you think you are. That voice inside your head, the one that says this is me, is only a small part of a much greater story. Most people spend their entire lives identifying with that tiny fragment, building their world around it, defending it, polishing it. They call it personality. Carl Jung called it the mask. And behind that mask lies the one thing most of us are afraid to face, the truth of who we really are. You feel it sometimes, that subtle pull, that quiet ache that says something in me wants to awaken. It's not ambition, it's not desire, it's a calling, a force that rises from somewhere deeper than thought, from the soul itself, whispering, "You were not born to remain asleep inside your own reflection." This is where the journey of individuation begins, not in success, not in comfort, but in that strange moment when life begins to feel too small for the person you've become. Maybe everything looks fine from the outside, yet you feel an invisible emptiness, a sense that you're living someone else's life. Maybe you've outgrown a relationship, a belief, a role that once defined you. Maybe you've done everything you were supposed to do, and still something in you is restless. That restlessness is not a flaw. It's the soul's signal that your next evolution is calling. It is the moment the old self begins to crumble and a deeper intelligence starts to take over. An ancient unconscious force that Jung called the self. The self is not the ego's idea of who you are. It is the totality, the unseen wholeness guiding your life from beneath the surface. It speaks in dreams, in symbols, in the people and situations that trigger you most. And when it wants your attention, it begins to dismantle everything that keeps you half alive. That's why the journey begins with a fall, a loss, a crisis, a confrontation with something you can't control. The ego calls it failure. The soul calls it initiation. Individuation is the process of becoming whole, of integrating the parts of yourself you've rejected, denied, or forgotten. It's not about self-improvement. It's about self-revelation. It's about turning inward and asking, who am I beneath my masks? Who am I when I stop performing? Who am I when life strips away everything I used to hide? The truth is, you've never been incomplete. You've only been unaware of your own depth, and the journey toward that awareness, that sacred unfolding of your full being, is what Jung called the path of individuation. The first step toward wholeness, Jung wrote, is to turn toward the darkness. That's where the second stage of individuation begins, when the mask starts to fall and everything you've been avoiding comes to the surface. It doesn't announce itself politely. It arrives through conflict, projection, heartbreak, exhaustion, through the moments that force you to meet yourself without disguise. You think you're fighting another person. You think your partner is cold, your boss unfair, your friend selfish. But slowly you begin to realize what you see out there is a mirror of what's been living in here. That mirror is what Jung called the shadow, the hidden side of your personality that carries everything you've denied or suppressed. Your jealousy, your anger, your hunger for control, your longing for power. All the traits you've been taught are unacceptable, too much, or unlovable. You buried them long ago, thinking that's what made you good. But what you buried never disappears. It waits, and it leaks out through projection. You see it in the person who triggers you for no logical reason, in the colleague whose arrogance infuriates you, because it mirrors your own repressed ambition, in the friend who seems so emotional, because you've learned to fear your own vulnerability. The world becomes a theater of reflection. Everyone you meet shows you a forgotten part of yourself. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That's why the shadow is not your enemy. It's your teacher. But facing it isn't easy. The ego fights back. It doesn't want to know it's capable of cruelty or envy or deceit. It prefers to maintain the image of being good. And yet, that's exactly why life keeps bringing us the same painful patterns. Until we turn toward the shadow, we are doomed to live it unconsciously. Think of the person who keeps choosing unavailable partners, the man who keeps sabotaging his own success, the woman who says she wants peace but keeps inviting chaos. These aren't random mistakes. They are messages from the unconscious. Each repetition says, look here, this is where you are split. When you finally stop running, something extraordinary happens. You start to see that the shadow is not only darkness, it's also potential. The traits you've rejected contain your buried vitality. Your suppressed anger might hide your power to set boundaries. Your envy might reveal a forgotten desire. Your fear of being seen might conceal your natural authority. Integration doesn't mean indulging these impulses. It means understanding them, bringing them into the light where they can transform. Because what you own cannot own you. Jung compared this to alchemy, the ancient art of transforming base metal into gold. In psychological terms, the base metal is your unconscious self, heavy, raw, instinctive. The gold is consciousness, awareness that can hold both darkness and light without splitting apart. That transformation happens not through denial, but through relationship. You begin to talk with the parts of you that once terrified you. You give them names. You listen, maybe in journaling, in dreams, in therapy, or in the silence of meditation. You discover that your shadow is not a monster. It's a child, wounded, confused, desperate to be seen. And when you finally turn toward it with compassion, the inner war softens. The voice that once sabotaged you begins to help you. The energy that once attacked you becomes creative fuel. Individuation at this stage feels like fire. Old identities burn away. You question who you've been and why you did the things you did. It can feel lonely because few people talk about this part of the journey. The world celebrates becoming, not unraveling. But the soul knows, before it can rise, it must descend. That descent, that courageous willingness to walk through your own darkness, is what makes real transformation possible. Because you can't embody your light until you've made peace with your shadow. And the more you embrace what you once feared, the freer you become. You no longer spend energy pretending. You no longer need to project your pain onto others. You begin to live from the center, from a place that feels strangely honest, even if it's raw. And in that rawness, something begins to grow. A quiet strength, a new kind of intuition. You begin to sense that life is not just happening to you, it's responding through you. The unconscious, which once frightened you, now starts to guide you. Through symbols, through dreams, through small coincidences that feel too meaningful to ignore. The language of the soul begins to speak more clearly. This is the middle of the journey, the place between who you were and who you are becoming. And though it feels uncertain, you start to realize something profound. The darkness was never the opposite of light. It was its doorway. When you've spent enough time in the underworld of your own psyche, something begins to shift. At first, it's almost imperceptible. A subtle calm beneath the chaos. A small light behind the eyes. You start to realize that the darkness you feared was not trying to destroy you. It was trying to show you what you needed to reclaim. This marks the next stage of individuation, the emergence of the deeper self. It doesn't come with fireworks or revelation. It comes quietly, in the moments when you stop fighting what is and begin to listen. Jung said that every human psyche seeks balance. What you reject on one side of yourself will return on the other, demanding attention. But once you start integrating the shadow, life itself begins to reorganize around you. The unconscious no longer needs to shout through conflict. It starts to whisper through symbols. You may notice it in your dreams first, a recurring image, a person you don't know yet somehow recognize, a house with rooms you've never seen, a child, an animal, a circle, a storm. Dreams are not random. They are the nightly dialogue between your ego and your soul. The unconscious speaks in the language of images because images bypass the defenses of the intellect. They go straight to the heart of transformation. You begin to see that your dreams are not fantasies. They are compensations. When your conscious life becomes too one-sided, your dreams restore balance. If you are too rational, you'll dream of floods. If you are too emotional, you'll dream of order and clarity. The psyche always seeks wholeness. As you begin to interpret these symbols, not as predictions, but as mirrors, you start to live in relationship with your unconscious. It is no longer an enemy, but a partner. You become curious about what life is trying to teach you instead of blaming it for your pain. And that curiosity opens the door to something Jung called synchronicity, meaningful coincidence. You think of someone, and they call. You read a line in a book that answers a question you never spoke aloud. You see the same symbol appear in a dream and in your waking life. These are not accidents. They are the psyche's way of saying, you're aligned. You're listening. The inner and outer worlds begin to reflect each other. It's as if reality itself becomes responsive, fluid, intelligent. This is when life feels guided, not by control, but by participation. You begin to trust that every experience, pleasant or painful, has purpose. that the unconscious is not chaos, but a hidden order trying to complete itself through you. You start to recognize that the self, this larger organizing principle, was never separate from you. It's been moving through your life from the beginning, shaping every loss, every meeting, every turning point. Many people mistake this stage for arrival, but it isn't. It's a deepening, because individuation is not about reaching a final state of enlightenment. It's about learning to live in dialogue with the mystery of your own psyche, to listen to what's beneath the surface and act from it consciously. This new awareness changes the way you see others too. You stop projecting as much. You see that everyone is struggling with their own shadow, their own unconscious story. Compassion grows naturally because you recognize yourself in them. You no longer divide the world into good and evil, right and wrong, light and dark. You begin to sense the unity beneath polarity. And this unity, this felt sense of oneness, is not a concept. It's an experience. It comes in moments of deep silence, when something in you relaxes into the truth that you are both human and divine, broken and whole, flawed and perfect at once. It's not something you achieve. It's something you remember. From here, life becomes a living symbol. Every encounter, every loss, every joy becomes a message from the unconscious, a thread in the great tapestry of your individuation. You start to live less from fear and more from meaning. You realize that you don't need to chase purpose. Your very existence is purpose unfolding. The path ahead is not without challenges. The ego will try to reclaim control, to turn your insights into identity. But if you stay humble, if you keep listening, you begin to sense that you're not walking toward wholeness. You are walking as wholeness, remembering itself through the human experience. And that realization changes everything. When the self begins to emerge, the world does not change overnight, but your relationship to it does. You return to ordinary life, yet nothing feels entirely ordinary anymore. You still have a name, a job, a body that gets tired and afraid. But beneath it all, you feel a quiet stillness, a sense of inner ground that wasn't there before. It's as if you've met something in yourself that cannot be shaken by outer events. This is the beginning of integration. After the descent into darkness and the encounter with the unconscious, the task now is to live what you've learned, to embody what you've become. Because transformation is meaningless if it remains only an inner experience. It has to find form in the world, in how you love, how you work, how you speak, how you respond to life. Jung called this the return to the world, the stage where the conscious and the unconscious unite, and the individual begins to express their inner truth in outer form. It's not about becoming extraordinary, it's about becoming real. The light you discovered in yourself isn't meant to separate you from others. It's meant to illuminate your connection to them. You start to notice this in small, human ways. You pause before reacting to someone's anger and realize you no longer need to defend yourself. You recognize the pain behind another person's harsh words and respond with understanding instead of judgment. You stop striving to prove your worth because you've met the part of you that never needed proof. This integration is not a straight line. You'll slip back into old patterns, You'll forget what you've learned. But each time you return to awareness, the remembering becomes easier. You begin to trust that even your setbacks serve the same process, the psyche's endless movement toward wholeness. And now, something beautiful begins to happen. The energy that once fueled your inner battles becomes creative. The same intensity that once went into hiding your shadow now pours into expression. Art, writing, teaching, building, caring. Whatever your path, your work starts to carry the vibration of authenticity. You no longer create to be seen. You create because it's your nature to express the self. You begin to sense that everything in life is part of this great alchemy. Not only joy, but loss. Every death makes space for new consciousness. Every disappointment dissolves another illusion. You stop asking why something happened and start asking what it's revealing. Meaning becomes the compass that guides you more than logic or control. People might not notice the change at first. Outwardly, you seem the same. But inwardly, your center of gravity has shifted. You no longer seek validation from the world. You bring your presence to it. That is the essence of individuation, to stand firmly in your own being while remaining connected to the whole. As you embody this awareness, the archetypes within you begin to harmonize. The warrior learns tenderness. The lover gains strength. The child grows wise without losing wonder. The old wounds no longer define you. They become symbols of initiation. You realize that the things that once broke you open were never punishments. They were invitations to awaken. From here, life is no longer a battlefield between opposites. It becomes a dance between them, light and shadow, joy and sorrow, life and death. You start to see the intelligence behind the chaos, the beauty behind the imperfection. And the more you live from that awareness, the less you need the world to be any different than it is. This is not detachment. It's participation without illusion. You feel the full range of human emotion, but you're not consumed by it. You can cry without despair, love without clinging, act without demanding reward. The ego has not disappeared. It's been reoriented. It now serves the self instead of trying to replace it. In mythic language, this is the hero's return, bringing the elixir back to the village. In psychological terms, it's living from the center instead of the periphery. You no longer divide your life into spiritual and ordinary, inner and outer, sacred and mundane. You see that they are one movement, consciousness experiencing itself through the human form. And though the journey continues, because individuation never truly ends, you sense that something essential has been restored. The split within you has healed enough for the world to feel alive again. You walk through life differently now, not as someone seeking wholeness, but as wholeness walking through the world. There comes a moment on the journey when you stop searching for who you are, because you finally understand you were never meant to find yourself. You were meant to become yourself. Individuation is not a destination. It's a lifelong unfolding, a conversation between your soul and the mystery that gave it life. You will forget. You will remember. You will lose and return. again. But every time you descend into darkness and rise once more, you bring back a piece of the truth. That wholeness was never somewhere else. It was always here, in you. And perhaps that's all life has ever wanted. For you to become fully human, and in doing so, to become divine. If this spoke to something deep within you, if you feel the call to understand your soul through the lens of depth psychology, subscribe to Soul of the Mind. Here, we explore the hidden language of the unconscious. Dreams, archetypes, the shadow, and the journey back to your true self. Your soul is already speaking. This is where you learn to listen.